their best. Tonight on The Story, we begin in Battleground, the latest Southwest Washington city to ban homeless camping on public property. It's a preemptive move and one of the city's many tools to address the growing crisis. Among those efforts, creating a community court, the first for this part of Washington.
There's a lot of people that just fall through the cracks.
By community court addressing the root causes of a lot of law enforcement contacts like mental health, substance abuse, barriers to licensing reinstatement, we are making the community safer.
It's our big story tonight. In northern Clark County, Washington, the rural city of Battleground is one step away from inner city life, a privilege for some, yet a challenge inside the area's only court system.
That's one of our biggest kind of friction points that we've had, is we don't have as many services out here for folks.
Andrew Wheeler is Battleground's municipal court judge.
We have court here 1 day a week.
Serving not only Battleground, but the communities of Ridgefield and La Center too. Many of Wheeler's cases, repeat offenders that at this point he knows by name.
But they make up a disproportionate number of the cases that we have.
The reasons behind many of those cases: drug addiction, mental health challenges, even traffic violations.
For the folks that are in that part of the system, that 10%, it is very profound.
To try and change that, city leaders are now creating what's called a community court, a voluntary program for those with low-level offenses, giving them the option to enroll in support services like treatment or housing assistance instead of jail.
You're going to make this appointment on this specific day. You're going to get this evaluation before we see you again in 3 weeks.
Historically, people with low-level offenses have been required to travel to Vancouver for these types of services.
And that is difficult because, again, especially if you're dealing with folks who can't get a valid license, sometimes the only way they can access services is to drive, and then they rack up another misdemeanor.
But soon they'll be available right in the Battleground courtroom, adding another tool for the sole prosecutor in the area, Jill Carmy.
For some folks, jail is that rock bottom and suddenly they turn it around. But when you have underlying substance abuse and mental health issues, really that jail sanction is not addressing those underlying root causes.
I think it's great. It's a waste of time anyways.
Why do you say it's a waste of time?
It's a waste of time because, well, they gotta jail them, they gotta feed them, and then they just come out and just do the same thing over and over again.
Laura, who lives in Southwest Washington, knows exactly what that's like. She's been to jail more times than she can count.
Oh, I bet you a dozen times over the years, mostly on traffic.
Do you think if you had the option of community court, that would have helped you?
Probably. It kind of scares you into doing the right thing, Nobody wants to go to jail.
Others in Battleground have questions.
I think it's a wonderful idea in theory. My question to you would be, or to anyone proposing this, is what is the recidivism rate, and do you get a cost benefit at the end of the program, and how are you going to measure it?
Something that will happen as community court gets underway.
The biggest impact we're hoping to see as we study the results over a year or two is, number one, reduced recidivism. But another goal for this program then is to free up court resources for truly taking to trial and prosecuting the more serious offenders that we have.
Like domestic violence cases and organized retail theft, charges Carmy says will not qualify for community court. Another move the city of Battleground is taking, banning homeless camping on public property.
City Battleground is a little delayed in all of this.
City Council passed the ordinance earlier this month, despite not having any unsanctioned campsites.
We're just trying to get ahead of the curve in the event that we see more of it, and give some tools to our officers to figure out how to deal with that if in fact we do have some encampments that pop up.
It's only civil penalties, it's not criminal.
If someone is caught camping on public property in Battleground, they'll face a $100 fine. That amount doubles if caught again within a year.
It's another piece of the puzzle. There's no one single ordinance or law that's going to solve this problem. It's got to be a multifaceted approach. Community court is one of those. Telling people you can't stay here forever and camp on somebody's front yard is another one of those.
The community court is set to open in June. They've already hired someone to coordinate that process, and city attorneys are already identifying people who would qualify. For now, they are relying on grant money to fund it. The judge tells me he's anticipating a slow start, but hopes it will eventually reduce the number of times the same people show up in court over and over again, with the hope of ultimately making Northern Clark County safer. All right, what are your thoughts on a community court? Do you think it's a good tool to have? Have you gone through a community court? And if so, what was the outcome? Let us know. Email the story at kgw.com or call and leave a voicemail, 503-226-5090. This week, the Council for Regional Government Metro met with other Tri-County leaders to discuss changes to the region's supportive housing services tax. It's a program we've talked a lot about here on The Story in recent days. And for those who are just hearing about it, here's a quick rundown of what the tax is. But before you change the channel at the sound of taxes, don't do it, because this tax comes with a lot of drama. Trust me. The Supportive Housing Services Tax Dollars, or SHS funds, are handled by Metro. It was approved by voters in 2020. The whole point of it is to pay for programs that address the homeless and addiction crisis in Washington, Clackamas, and Multnomah counties. The idea, get people into housing and keep them there. It's a 1% tax that applies to high-income earners, money that individuals make above $125,000, and any income above $200,000 for couples filing jointly. There's also a 1% business income tax on certain companies. Metro Council President Lynn Peterson will join us live in just a minute here to talk about this. But last month, she proposed some changes to the tax, hoping to have voters decide on those changes on the May ballot. After facing major criticism, that idea has been pushed to potentially have voters decide this fall. Peterson wanted to create an oversight committee to ensure transparency and accountability, which she says is badly needed. She also wanted to make it so affordable housing development falls under what's considered a valid expense. And that is where some of the criticism comes. Basically, the Metro president wants to use the tax to pay for more things. She's also proposed extending the tax to the year 2050. It's currently set to expire in 2030. But as a trade-off for that extension, she would lower the tax rate. It's currently at 1% for high earners. She's proposing to reduce that to 0.75% in 2031. So that's some background, and that proposal could change before this fall. But back to that accountability piece and the major point of discussion in Metro's more than an hour-long meeting last night. Multnomah County wants to have control over how they spend those SHS tax dollars. Metro wants to keep track of it. And as we've been telling you since Friday, Multnomah County is also facing a major budget shortfall in their Homeless Services Department, which relies heavily on SHS dollars. The county blames their $104 million gap in part on Metro forecasting a reduced amount of SHS tax revenue. Metro argues that if they were able to track how the counties spend those tax dollars, maybe Multnomah County wouldn't be in this position in the first place. All right, to help us get into all of this, joining us now live is Metro President Lynn Peterson. President Peterson, thanks for coming on the show.
Good evening, and thanks for having me, Blair.
All right, let's start with the friction point heating up between Metro and Multnomah County. Last week, County Chair Jessica Vega Peterson asked Metro for $30 million to help fill their $104 million budget gap in their Homeless Services Department. So what do you have to say to her request?
Well, we were surprised at the request because we've been asking the county to reform their budgeting to be more conservative, to provide stability to the services for real people. We've asked them to streamline the oversight and increase transparency so that we can all better manage our risks together as part of a regional system. And the answer from the chair has been no for several years. She's refused to provide data, details on budgeting, and importantly, the results. And as a result, put the county budget on a roller coaster ride over the last several years of overspending and then cutting. It's like basing the size of your monthly mortgage on the one paycheck that reflected your annual bonus. You can't afford that level of spending every month, right? And then asking your neighbors to chip in on the mortgage the rest of the time.
So in your council meeting yesterday, you called the county chair's request for this money a, quote, admission of negligence. Can you explain that choice of words there?
Yeah, it's essentially, as was talked about in your program yesterday, they used one-time money for programmatic funding that is ongoing. So if you essentially overspending.
Okay, so my question for you, though, is should Metro have seen Multnomah County's major budget shortfall coming?
You know, as I just said, we have been asking for reform for the last several years to be able to have insight into that. What Metro Council wants is a regional system with real results for people that manages the risks so that we provide that stability to people that need that stability. And so I'm just happy that many of our partners want the same thing. The county commissioners at Multnomah County, the mayors of this region, thought leaders all came together at the president's work group, as you mentioned, and really want to proactively together manage these risks. And part of that is being open and transparent about how the money is being spent.
Why wasn't that type of tracking included initially?
No, we've been asking for it as we move along in the creation of this program.
Okay, so Multnomah County, we know, is partly blaming their budget shortfall on what the chair is calling Metro's volatile SHS tax in forecasting. So why is the forecasting seemingly so unreliable? I mean, last year you all collected way more than you anticipated, and this year we're talking about tens of $millions less. So what is going on here?
Right. Well, it's the same as the state. The income tax is a volatile tax, right? And what that means is that as folks have capital gains, sell property, sell stocks, we don't know when and how they're going to do that on an annual basis. Some years people hold tight onto their money, and some years they're getting rid of it and spending that money. And that's when the tax comes through. So we don't know year to year how that works. And that's why the state has the kicker, is that volatility, is being able to work and manage that risk that the state has. We also do that, and we let the counties know that we are plus or minus $50 million on that estimate. And so we've been asking them to manage that conservatively and spend to a level that they are pretty sure they're going to have, and then figure out what to do if more comes in.
So what do you have to say to county leaders and even service providers who are still steadfast in their thinking that the SHS tax should not be reformed?
You know, I'm not hearing a whole lot from folks about not reforming. There is indeed a movement from the business community, from the providers, from most of the county commissioners around the region and the mayors that reform has to happen. I think, you know, when we look ahead, we are all of those jurisdictions I mentioned are actually facing deficits in our own budget. And so we are all understanding how to manage through those deficits. And that means efficiency and cost cutting. It doesn't mean we're going out to our jurisdictional partners to fill a deficit, especially when caused by our own overspending.
Okay, President Lynn Peterson, thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you.
Tomorrow, Multnomah County and the City of Portland are holding yet another joint work session talking about their response to homelessness. It's the 5th time the two governments have come together to talk about their response since 2023. I'll be there, and I'll bring you the latest tomorrow night. But first, we want to hear from you. Do you think changes should be made to the Supportive Housing Services tax? Why or why not? And do you think Metro should have the power to track how Multnomah County spends that money? You know the drill. Email the story at kgw.com or call and leave a voicemail, 503-226-5090. Now, following my story yesterday on Multnomah County's homeless services budget shortfall, we asked for your thoughts, and let's just say you didn't hold back.
I feel Tina Kotek should not send Multnomah County another dime. I feel they should take all these Multnomah County people who on the homeless committee and fire them all and get new people in there before investing any more money.
Garrett chimed in saying one does not wake up to being short of $100 million. So continuing the uselessness of the county politicians, why did you wait until now to disclose any shortfall? It would have been better for the public to know a shortfall existed at $1, not $100 million. Good grief. Did you all have your heads in the sand? A viewer who signed their email Buttercup wrote to us in part, both Chair Peterson and Dan Field should resign effective immediately. Governor Kotek should not entertain providing 1 cent without their resignations. Any and all dollars allocated and utilized by the Multnomah County, Homeless Services Department needs to be approved by Governor Kotek, Metro President, and Mayor Wilson. Every dime. And we will end on this one from Nancy. The new homeless programs and departments created in both Portland and Multnomah County in the past with one-time windfalls should be canceled before anything else. There is never a good reason to start new programs with one-time dollars and then kick the can down the road saying they'll figure out funding later. It's nothing short of craziness and irresponsibility. Well, keep your comments coming, and they might be featured tomorrow night right here on The Story. Well, coming up next, we're getting local reaction to the massive cuts to U.S. aid thanks to the Trump administration and Elon Musk's Doge. What 2 former U.S. ambassadors have to say about their experiences with U.S. aid and what these cuts could mean in the long term. That's when The Story returns. Impacts from the flurry of executive orders by President Trump in his first few weeks in office. And that includes a freeze on billions of dollars in foreign aid. Today, a federal judge gave the Trump administration less than 2 days to release that money, following an order to do just that nearly 2 weeks ago. The judge saying today the administration has given no sign of complying with that initial order, and they need to this week. And this past weekend, the Trump administration put nearly all of USAID's 4,700 full-time employees on paid leave. It's set to eliminate 1,600 of those positions. A different federal judge allowed that to move forward, rejecting pleas to stop it. USAID handles civilian foreign aid and development assistance around the world. And a retired U.S. ambassador now working at Lewis and Clark College tells us people in those countries will suffer. Niels Marquardt is a diplomat in residence at Lewis and Clark. He served 33 years in the State Department before retiring in 2013. He says he's seen firsthand the work done by U.S. aid.
You know, as a former U.S. ambassador who had AID colleagues in my embassy who did work that I was very proud of, I became very familiar with it. I visited their sites, and you know, my job as U.S. ambassador was to draw attention overseas to the good work that is done by and on behalf of the American people, so that people in the countries where we work would actually know what the United States was doing. This would buy us goodwill, would buy us access. That has suddenly stopped. And it's not just that it's stopped, but you know, you have people that have HIV/AIDS in Africa under the President's Emergency Fund for AIDS Relief, or PEPFAR. It's been around for 20 years. It was founded by President George W. Bush, and it's one of the most amazing life-saving initiatives that any country or any entity has ever taken in the history of mankind. 25 million people are alive today because of this. They would not be alive. They'd be dead.
He says helping out other countries is good for the U.S. too. Without U.S. aid, we lose access, like he mentioned, and also influence.
We have really given up probably our preeminent tool for soft power projection in the world, something that wins us friends and demonstrates that we're not just a powerful and a wealthy country, but we're also a generous country. And that's a value that's important to Americans, and best demonstrated by these bags of flour or corn or rice that have a handshake like this on them, and it says, "From the American people." I've been seeing those for 50 years since I first went to Africa as a Peace Corps volunteer in the 70s. And the notion that suddenly we're not going to be doing that anymore, and we're going to let others try to fill this void. And by others, we have concerns about countries like China, Russia, moving in and probably not doing the job as well as we have done it, because they don't have the decades of experience, but also filling the void of friendship that we have established with so many peoples around the world.
Another retired ambassador from Bellingham, Washington, agrees that cutting U.S. aid is costly beyond simply dollars and cents. Eric Wilkinson brings us the story.
Raised in Bellingham, Jeffrey Hovenier has been a U.S. diplomat for more than 30 years. He says his favorite part of the job is simple:
representing the United States of America.
Hovenier spent the last 3 years as an ambassador to Kosovo, where he saw firsthand the benefits of foreign aid dispensed by USAID, a program now targeted for closure by the Trump administration. It's a move the career diplomat feels is counterintuitive.
Our programs combat sources of instability, things that give rise to terrorism. There are USAID programs in Central America, for example, that create conditions so people don't want to migrate.
President Trump is undergoing mass firings of federal workers and shutdowns of government programs as part of his America First policy to save U.S. taxpayers money. He questions how the money is being spent by USAID and whether it could be better spent domestically. While conceding USAID could use some reform, Hovenier says the president's threatened shutdown of the agency will destabilize the globe and allow America's adversaries to exert greater influence over foreign nations. He believes Trump's America First policy is, in this regard, putting America second.
You know that China, Russia, other competitors are ready to step in.
Kosovo and other USAID projects may seem like a world away from Bellingham and the rest of Washington, but there is a direct connection that translates to prosperity and jobs here at home.
Last year, about $82 million was spent by USAID or granted or contracted with Washington state entities.
The former ambassador says the farming and tech sectors would be hit the hardest.
So there's a big impact for Washington state as well.
While the U.S. provided $68 billion in aid to the world in 2023, that comprises less than 1% of the federal budget. It's money Hovenier believes is well spent.
It's hard to understand why this particular group is being singled out.
Eric Wilkinson reporting there. And we'll keep tabs on whether or not the Trump administration complies with today's federal ruling to release billions in U.S. aid dollars. And we'll keep you posted. We're back right after this. Well, that is the end of our show, folks. Thanks so much for watching. The good stuff is coming your way next with a special host, Matt Zaffino, tonight. And don't forget, everyone has a story to tell. If you ever miss an episode of The Story at 6:30, we re-air the episode at 8:30 and 10:30 p.m. over on our TV app, KGW+. You can download the free app right now. It's on Roku, Apple TV, and Fire TV. And in the meantime, have a great Tuesday night. I'll see you right back here tomorrow night at 6:30.